And this is on the basis of the experience I have had over more than 28 years in UNHCR and 3 years in Greece, that I would like to introduce, and thank you for this, Despina, for inviting UNHCR and myself to introduce the topic that you will be discussing for these 3 days. And as you were saying, we are late. We are late in terms of integration, but I also want to, it's not the fault of the Director of Integration of the Ministry of Migration Policy. I think it's a collective responsibility, which is the Greek responsibility, but also the European Union responsibility and our responsibility in general, to ensure that the persons who flee persecution, flee wars, are entitled by the Greek national legislation, the EU legislation, the international legislation to be protected. There is no here right to or not from the state. There's an obligation on the part of the Greek state as well as the 27 other EU member states and many other states throughout the world through their ratification of the Geneva Convention to respect basic rules for certain people who fear persecution or who are fleeing wars. As Mayor Boutaris has said, and I want to thank him again for his hospitality and his the initiatives that he has shown in this respect, for the time being, and even that is being disputed today by some member states and some states in the world, the little that we have as legal obligations on the part of state to receive some people who are fleeing persecution and who are fleeing wars is at stake. So not to talk about all others who may have very legitimate needs and who are moving towards Europe and other countries as currently called migrants. They have legitimate needs, they have legitimate objectives, but for the time being, under international, European and national legislation, the rights that are foreseen, the obligations of the state are not the same. Whether we like it or not, whether we can fight as citizens, as mayors, as members of parliament, as members of European Parliament to increase the protection that should be provided to people who are trying to come to various countries, we also have to look at what exists and make sure that what exists, what is legally binding, is respected and that EU member states are supported if they are receiving more than by other EU member states. That's the internal solidarity that we wish to be applied. So yesterday I wrote, because I have noticed, despite my little Greek communication capacity, that there are elections also in this country, that the elections are regarding municipality, regions, EU Parliament, and soon national elections. So I wrote in the context of the European elections to all presidents of democratically based political parties represented in the national parliament of Greece and who have candidates to the European Union Parliament, to let them know what, as UNHCR, we ask them, political parties, candidates to the European Parliament, to support, as UNHCR is proposing that 7 calls are endorsed by a candidate to the European Parliament. And I think they also resonate very much in the Greek situation, and I'll try each time to make sure that I reflect the Greek situation. So the first call that we make to all political parties having candidates in the EU Parliament is to protect people's right to safety and asylum. This morning or yesterday night, even in Europe, in the heart of Europe, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, had to make a statement because basic rights to safety and asylum were not respected by an EU member state of the European Union. Yet this morning, Filippo Grandi had to react to an act which is not safeguarding the rights of asylum seeker, of people seeking asylum in Hungary, where Afghan people who had been kept in detention since January when they set foot in Hungary were basically given a choice which was not a choice, either step in a plane going back to Kabul or to be sent back to Serbia where they had come from, without basic procedures being conducted. When such situations arise, we have even, and certainly even more, perhaps even in European Union, in democratic states, to state that the basic has to be respected, the right to safety and asylum. So this is the basic, and today I will not develop that element, but of course it's the first one, the right to entry, the right to safety, the right to enter the European Union, and you are a country, Greece, which is at the external border of the European Union. Neighboring, indeed, as Mayor Boutaris said, a country which is the first country of asylum in the world in the context of a population with more than 4,200,000 refugees, not in camps, because most of them actually are not staying in camps. The Syrian refugees who constitute most of them, around almost 4 million refugees, only 6% of them are in camps. All others are in various cities of Turkey, and many of them, more and more, gaining lawful employment. 68% of the refugee children of Syria in the neighboring country are going to school, which is 268,000. It's a lot of people. So what is extremely important indeed is that these countries, the first asylum countries, those who receive far more refugees than others, are assisted. And I think it's the duty of the European Union member states to help these countries, be it Turkey, but also Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Cameroon, and Bangladesh, so many places where refugees are currently staying, who are far more than what European is receiving. So the first element is, again, the capacity for people who are fleeing persecution, fleeing war, to have access to safety and asylum. The second, of course, is not only to let the people enter, but have fair and fast EU or national asylum procedures. A lot has been done in Greece, but we observe with concern that the length of the asylum procedure is getting too long. With some of the asylum seekers who come in your city, Mayor Boutaris, and go and ask at the regional asylum office in Thessaloniki to get asylum, some of them get an interview in 2023. This is too long, and we will be working and seeing with the Asylum Service and the Ministry of Migration Policy how additional, and the European Union, how additional support can be provided so that the length of the asylum procedure, which had gone down in Greece, can continue to be reasonable, both on the islands as well as on the mainland, because we are not seeing the number of people arriving like in 2015 or the beginning of 2016, but we are still seeing a steady arrival of people both on the islands, a little bit more than 10% increase since from 2017 to 2018, and this is continuing the same rhythm, but also a very strong increase on the land border, where in 2018 we have seen a very important increase of persons seeking protection trying to enter through the land border. So asylum procedures need to be fair, efficient, and quick so that persons can quickly know what is their fate. and if they can benefit from international protection. What we still see in terms of the statistics and the people arriving in Greece is that the vast majority of them in 2018 and 2019 are still originating from countries where the recognition rate of the asylum service is very high, like Afghanistan, which is around 71% recognition rate. So most of these Afghans who are applying for asylum will get either recognized as refugees or subsidiary protection. The others, the second, are still Iraqis and Syrians and Palestinians for those who arrive on the islands. For all these nationalities, the recognition rate of the asylum service is above 70 and up to 90 to 95% for the Palestinians. And if there is this 5% which is not given refugee status to Palestinians, it's just because some people are pretending they are Palestinians and they are not Palestinians, and they do not then get refugee status. So again, what we can see on the basis of what has been happening so far on the nationalities arriving from Turkey are mainly Afghans, Syrians, Iraqis, Democratic Republic of Congo nationals on the islands. In the mainland, we see a majority of Turkish nationals arriving on the border. So most and a large number of these people will get a positive answer. It's important that they get it in time, and while they are waiting, that they indeed can benefit from decent conditions of reception. And there, I think, through the assistance provided by the European Union, the capacity of the Greek state has considerably increased with both the REAC program that is conducted in Thessaloniki, but in so many other towns, and I see Representative Kardica, and also I know from Larissa and from Thessaly in general, and other regions throughout Greece, which benefit from the apartment scheme which has been developed and which we are working with the Ministry of Migration Policy so that the state of Greece, the ministry, will be able by 2020 and 2021 to implement fully the accommodation and the cash program for the asylum seekers, who also benefit not only from accommodation if they are in apartments or in camps or in hotels on emergency cash cards which allow them to pay for themselves, to be autonomous, and this is one of the elements which can lead to social inclusion, integration, that you will be discussing so much. So, in addition, the third point is showing solidarity between EU countries. As we have seen, 22,000 asylum seekers benefited from relocation before. These relocation programs have stopped. We are in a dead end for the time being in terms of a system within the European Union which would organize a fair distribution of asylum seekers within EU member states. We have gone through the relocation program. We need EU member states to arrive to a consensus and a system which goes beyond Dublin. But at the same time, we are realistic, and we see that the Romanian presidency will most probably not achieve big efforts in this field, also with the elections coming, and we see radicalization in many EU member states on the issue of refugees and migrants. But this is very important, and meanwhile, we welcome those states which are showing solidarity, like, for example, Portugal, who is proposing that 1,000 asylum seekers and refugees can move from Greece to Portugal in the near future. Such practices are necessary within the European Union. So the fourth call that we make to political parties is to offer more legal options for refugees to reach safety in Europe. This is resettlement, relocation, because one way of supporting asylum states like Turkey, first asylum states, is definitely to support them through funds, but it's also to support them through resettlement so that legal pathways are organized for refugees who are identified in these countries to come to Europe. Save Lives at Sea. Greece from 2015 has been an exemplary state in continuing to save and rescue those people who are making the journey despite a short distance and saving lives between Turkey and Greece. But this even very simple tradition, a respected rule, is today compromised by the discussion that we see not in this part of the Mediterranean, but in the central Mediterranean, when each boat arriving is a extremely difficult individual situation to find the country who will, or the countries who will host these people seeking safety, because of the position that the Italian government has taken recently, changing its policy and leading to, again, a dead end for the time being. And dead is the right word, because of these policies, more people again are losing their lives in the Mediterranean Sea. Welcome refugees into their new homes. I think this is what we are qualifying as integration. Integration, it has to start as early as possible, and even the program that we have put in place, which is with the Greek government, of supporting through decent conditions of living in apartments and cash card, sometimes can even be, and I think we have to discuss that also very clearly, if there is a systematic financial assistance and provision of apartments without, from the start, looking at having people become self-reliant, it will be a failure. And we see it will for some time, of course, help very importantly people who are in need of assistance. But if it's not accompanied sufficiently by measures supporting the practical social inclusion of asylum seekers and refugees, we will collectively fail, because it will be very difficult once the program stops. And we have seen that now that asylum seekers, recognized refugees, have been staying sometimes more than 2.5 years in those apartments. They are supposed to leave these apartments, and this has started at the end of April and is continuing month by month without having sufficient guarantees that self-reliance will be possible for many. And there we have to, and we're working together with the Ministry of Migration Policy, but even, I would say, more importantly, with those who are closer to the asylum seekers and the refugees, the municipalities, the NGOs, the development social agencies, which are close to the people and know how they can support a smooth integration. The first thing, as you know, and I'm sure this will be discussed, is the formal conditions to be able to either benefit from social welfare or to be self-reliant and have the capacity to work, which is AMCA and all the very, and I come from a country which is also legalistic, sometimes bureaucratic, and the procedures are not easy for Greek nationals. They are even more difficult for foreigners who do not master the language. And of course, the language, which we have been waiting for altogether, despite some efforts made at the local level, it is absolutely important, and Secretary General Klapas knows that very well, that the language courses begin as early as possible, from Crete to Epirus and in the other islands. This is an absolute necessary basis for, upon which refugees can try to have access and successful gainful employment. So welcoming refugees into their homes, it means as clever, in the most clever way and in the most adapted way in a country to make sure that integration is possible. Mayor Boutaris again referred to the success that Greece has had in slowly, closely, surely integrating a big Albanian population. My first position as a professional was cultural attaché for the French embassy in Albania in a long time ago, when it was still, Enver Hoxha had just died. But at that time, nobody was getting out of Albania. It was impossible. And they were shot at. But as you know, because of the conditions that this country had to go through, many of its population had to leave and to various countries, and of course to the neighboring country, Greece. Greece has been successful, but at the same time, I have discussed with many Albanian citizens, and many are still suffering from the conditions under which they are integrating. And although much has been done, far more needs to be done so that children who are born here can more quickly access the naturalization procedures and so on. And you will be discussing naturalization, I think, and even avoidance of statelessness within Greece. Albanians are usually not stateless, but they need to, all this needs to be further, more transparent, more clear procedures and faster procedures so that these populations who are already working very much can successfully integrate the society. And the last call we make to politicians all over Europe is not only to deal with them within their countries, and within European Union, but also to support the first asylum countries and to prevent and allow people to remain where they are. Because again, many of the refugees I have met throughout the country, the world, the Iraqis, Syrian, their dream is not Europe. Their dream, for most of the ones I have seen, is to live in their country. Many of them, I agree, and particularly for the children, it is difficult if they have stayed very long away from their countries, and they will become Hellenic citizens for many, and they will do it with great success, we hope. But the first thing is that people are not dreaming of Europe, and they want to stay. For most of those I have encountered, all in the 30 years I've worked with them, mostly in their countries and even their region. So thank you. I have been too long, but it will be a long issues to deal with, and I hope we can contribute as well. Thank you.